So how many feature films have you worked on, like that are like your creation?
The ones are you referring to the ones that I've directed, or just the ones that I've been involved in?
Both.
Okay. Well, this goes back to, it's all rooted in the same thing. You know, I was doing illustration work and doing animation stuff, and I ran into this filmmaker Dan Hall, who I think I ran into him because we were doing some animation for the Pacers, and I needed it output onto a DVD, and I talked to him, and he was able to help us do that. And at the time, he was making, I think, his it was his first feature, I think, and so he had me come in, and I did some little storyboards for him and stuff, and that kind of started the passion that I for, because I've always loved movies, but it's one of those things you just don't think you can just you don't think you can make a movie.
And this is all do it yourself stuff. This is all stuff that you guys like. You network with people locally that were doing their own creator owned like films.
Yeah, Dan financed his films through his multimedia video company. Like, he would shoot corporate video, and then he would use those funds to make his
passion project.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to do it. So, and he would have people like me who'd be like, "Yeah, I'll do storyboards.
That's so cool.
Go on the set." So I did some storyboards for him, and then I did some animation on his next feature, and then I was contacted by a guy named Gary Wood, who made Open Micers, and I did some animation on that, which was great because he had Cindy Morgan from Caddyshack in that movie. So like, okay, so I did a caricature and some animation of Cindy Morgan. I got to meet her. That was pretty cool. And again, this was before I'd done open mics, and he made an Open Micers film, and I was oblivious to it. But and then so that didn't really have much of a push for me to make films, because I just never really thought about making films. It's just, other than making animated films, making animated shorts and stuff. So I am at Days of no, I'm at Horror. It wasn't even Horror Hunt. It was Famous Monsters convention. I think they had a convention years ago, and you've done a lot of these. We did some together, some horror conventions where we would go and we draw horror type caricatures. So I was
people as zombies,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Vampires.
We did that for quite a bit together, which was fun. So
I remember that first year we did it. We cleaned up. I mean, it was a good crowd, and they were really into it.
Yeah.
Right,
we had some good ones and some bad ones.
Yeah, there was a few where we didn't make a whole lot of money.
Right. It was still fun though. That's the thing. I've always, not to get off topic, but everything I've done, I've always looked at it like, is this fun? Obviously you want to make money, but if you're just in it for the money, there's better ways to make money.
Right.
And especially filmmaking. So. Anyway, so I'm at Famous Monsters, and I'm doing my horror caricatures, and I'm trying to sell my artwork. And my friend Chuck Terrell comes out because he's kind of a movie fan, a monster movie fan, and but he's a photographer guy. So we're sitting there and we're seeing these people selling their little movies, their little independent films, and we're just looking at each other, and Chuck's like, "You know what? We should make a little film so we could sell that at your booth while you're doing." Your artwork, and that was the inclination. So it's like we sat down and said, how do we make a film? We don't know. So what we did was, I said, okay, let's start. We'll make a short film, and we made a little short film that was just some idea that I had about spinning a knife and stabbing. It was like a 5-minute film, and then we made another film. It was like a 15-minute, just this kind of missing persons film, and then we're like, we're going to jump to do a feature, which is absolutely the best way to go about it. Just not the smartest way. Most people, you got.
But you're going to make most mistakes, and you're going to learn the most in a short amount of time. And
I've always been, So we sit down like, what the heck? Let's just make a feature. How do you make a feature? I don't know. Let's stitch some short stories together and make an anthology. Because I've always loved anthologies, and I thought, well, so what I did was, I sat down, I took 3 or 4 of these little horror comic ideas that I had that were going to be comic book stories, and a couple I had drawn out already, so I just used those as storyboards, and we kind of stitched all these stories together, and we just started filming. Chuck had this little digital camera that we had used, and he used actually he used his inheritance that he just got, and unfortunately his father passed away, and then he used that money to buy these nice 4K cameras.
Wow! So he funded his whole production company.
Yeah,
sort of just through
right, and that's
I think it's common, isn't it? Like, a lot of people probably just come into a little bit of money and then they decide they're going to pursue their dream.
Right, and I
dream
think
job.
that's probably the best way to honor his father is that he's doing something that he's always wanted to do.
Right.
So we got the cameras and we made all our mistakes, and it's so we don't know anybody because we haven't really networked a lot. I leaned on a lot of art clients, so like, I did some artwork for this guy, can we film here? I knew the guys at the drive-in, can we film at the drive-in? It's all leaning on your friends. Who do you know? Who can you get? I had my son was in it and his girlfriend at the time, and Chuck had met a kid named Jordan Campbell in college. Chuck was taking some like film courses because the military paid for that, and so we just kind of went out there, and that first day of film, one of the first days of filming was just one of the most adventurous things because we didn't have a crew. The crew was a 2-man crew. It was,
You're learning on the fly.
We're learning on the fly, but also we didn't have a lot of help.
Right.
So Chuck's holding the camera, and I think the light, and I'm holding the sound, the microphone, and the script.
Right.
And it's nuts.
Yeah.
And we're just going around filming, and halfway through, one of the kids had to go home, so I had to drive somebody home, and just all the things. But that's the way you do it. I've always kind of like been that guy that's, the movie Field of Dreams. Go the distance has kind of been my thing. I think that's the thing is, if you wait for everything to come into place, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
you got to use what you have. I think our first little short film, our sound recording device was my Mac laptop. We just used the sound on that as an external sound.
Oh, wow.
And this little camera, and you start there and then you build up. And that's what got us into filmmaking, but it's all, still all related because in the film I did some animation for the film, so, and it's all based, most of the stories were based off of comics I had written, so it's all coming out of that central creative thing.
Now, was that always the ultimate goal, is to make movies?
Movies were not on my radar at all.
Really? Because it sounds like you're very passionate, excited about the movies, and I always thought like maybe everything was a stepping stone to get here.
I don't think I was directed there, but I think
you stumbled upon it. Maybe?
I think it was kind of always in me because as a kid I always loved movies.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite things, my mom would always be watching these movies, these classic movies, like Cary Grant and like she introduced me to Psycho, which is awesome. And like all these she'd always watch these classic movies, and I would sit and watch them with her. James Garner and all these things. I think I figured out later that they were all good-looking dudes that she liked to watch. But anyway, so I was always, and I had these little. She'd gotten me these 8mm films when I was very young, and a little projector. I still have this old projector. It's from the 50s, and I would sit in my room and I'd put on the little 15-minute Creature from the Black Lagoon, remember those little 8-minute, and they'd all, it was crappy projector. So halfway through it would stop and it'd melt, and I'd be like, no.
I always had those little vision, like the little, the ones where they had the white discs, and you would slide it into the camera, and you look up into the light, and you would push it.
Oh, you're talking about a ViewMaster.
A ViewMaster.
Yeah.
And I would always see those, like, and they would always show old clips of like Star Trek or Creature from the Black Lagoon, whatever. Like it was something old, or they would show like old cartoons, like Looney Tunes or something, or even Disney.
Yep. Those were cool.
Those were a lot of fun. That was like my first like introduction into just like it was just a frame. It was a cell. It was just one frame. Right. And it might have a little bit of dialogue. Yeah. And that was it. And
those were fun. Yeah. But I had all these little 8mm films that I would just sit in my room, just project these little films. It was very cool. So I think I had always loved films, but it was again one of those things where it doesn't even enter your mind because you think it's so far removed from the world. Because as a kid, you think, oh man, Hollywood's Hollywood's this planet
right.
on another world that you could never get to. And
right.
making, you never think you could make your own film.
Isn't it weird though? Like when we were kids, we weren't anywhere close to this.
Right.
Like we didn't have the technology at our fingertips.
My gosh,
These kids now have everything with a cell phone. Like what we're shooting on right now is like we're doing this. This is like we could have never done something like this when we were kids.
Yes.
Unless we had like a lot of money tied up into it, which when kids don't have any money.
I had a Brownie. Actually, it's sitting right over there. That same Brownie 8mm wind up camera that I had when I was a kid, and I think I shot some stuff. I don't know. I don't have the film anymore, but and then at one point in high school, I bought a used video camera from a pawn shop, and I filmed some stuff. Right. But I think that I always loved films, and I just didn't really think I was going to make a film, but then I just kind of got into it, and now it's like, it's very rewarding to produce a film.
Yeah.
It's,
so I guess, like, my next question is, like, what creative project are you working on currently? Do you have anything, like, in the works, any irons in the fire?
I've got irons in I've got a bunch of stuff. I think, like, all of us, we all have, you probably get this request every once in a while as an artist. You probably got somebody that comes up to you or emails you and says, "Hey man, I've got this great book idea. You draw it, I'll write it, we'll put it together."
Yes.
All the time.
All the time.
Or, I've got this movie idea, this animation idea. Well, I look at them and go, I don't know. Because they're coming to me with one idea.
Yeah.
Well, here on my table, I've got 15 ideas.
Right.
I've got about 10 little book ideas, and I'm sure you do too, that I've not done. So am I going to do your project, or am I going to do one of the 15 on my table?
Right.
So I've got, sitting right over there, I've got about 10 little kids book kind of ideas. And I've got about 20 rough caricature ideas of like studio caricatures that I want to do, where I've drawn out, like the movie Some Like It Hot or something that's all sketched out and ready to go, but I haven't done it yet. And then I've got another list of, these are all these animated shorts I'm going to do. And then I've got these movie ideas. So I've got tons of stuff that's ready to go. Currently, we're in pre-production for a movie called The Killing Game, which will be a third movie that I'm directing. I'm getting ready to pitch another animated thing to Steel Panther, which is this kind of metal band that I've done some animation work before.
They do a lot of touring around the country, don't they? They're based out of where? California?
They're out of California. I just saw them a few days ago, actually, and talked to the guys. But they tour quite a bit. So that's an interesting thing, because you message them, and then they don't get back to you for 6 months because they're touring, and they finally catch up on 1,000 emails, and then you get a message out of the blue from them. So I'm getting ready to pitch something to them, and then I've got this book that's been setting, that's like 90% that is for the last 6 months, where I just got to get that final push to get this other like it's a kids book about Frankenstein or Dracula. So yeah, and then amongst that, just doing caricature gigs, and then I think you're this way too, and most creatives are. You're going to walk out the door, and you're going to be like, "Oh, here's a great idea for something." Because you and I, and Daryl and all these guys.
I say it so many times, like in my most mundane moments of the day, my best creative moments come to me, and I always have to make sure I have like something to write them down, because I will forget, and they'll just disappear. Right. Yeah.
I have this theory that, I don't know if it's true, but I always tell myself that if I don't write something down and it's a good enough idea, I'll remember it.
So here, getting this.
Not that that's true.
This gets me to my next question.
Okay.
What is the one piece of advice that you would give, like, any kind of aspiring artist?
Well, let me say this.
It seems how we're dishing out advice, you and I both together here.
I'm full of advice. Yeah. I'm not very helpful on phone. But let me say this before we get to that question, because you were talking about how you get these mundane moments where you write stuff down before you forget it.
Oh, I'm like doing some kind of mindless task where I'm like sweeping up a floor, doing dishes, and that's when it hits me. And I'm like, most of the time, I'm nowhere near a sketch pad or any kind of like notepad. And I'm like, the best thing to do is just to write, I write down notes on my phone. Or
I speak mine into my phone.
That's a good way to do it.
And then it comes out as gibberish because it translates wrong. But I kind of get the gist of it. Here's what happens to me like 90% of the time. I'll get these ideas that are like, brilliant. not brilliant, but like the idea I've been waiting for, like, and it's always like these inopportune moments, you know, like I'll be driving somewhere across somewhere, you know, a couple hour, 4 hour drive with my wife, and she's in the car and I'm driving, and I'm like, how am I gonna like? I either have to like record it and let her hear this idea, which is fine.
Oh, gosh.
And I feel awkward about like talking my ideas into a phone while other people are in the room. You know what I mean? If they're not involved in that project, so I'm like, well, I gotta pull over. I gotta go to the bathroom, and then, you know, I get back in the car. Can you drive? And while she's driving, I'll write it down. Or like last night, I lay down. It's like 2 in the morning. So it's like 2 in the morning, and I'm laying there, and she kind of wakes up because she gets up to get ready for work and stuff. But I think this is like 4 in the morning or so. She gets really early. So I kind of wake up with this like idea, and then she gets called off from work. So she didn't have to go to work at the hospital because she's a nurse. So we're laying there, and I'm like, it's 4 in the morning and it's dark, and I've got this I finally got this whole story idea. I just was like, you know what? She was kind of like, hey, you know what? I got to get this idea out of my head or I'm going to forget it. So I just sat there and then I typed it out because I didn't want to, because normally I would have gone out. I was too tired. I would go outside and just say it in the phone. I'm sitting there texting for like 20 minutes writing this whole little script before I forget it. But it's always the most unopportune times. Right. It's always,
Well, I think we're going to end it there because I think that pretty much answered the question. I think we're just basically just like making sure you always have something handy to write down your ideas that that can just kind of float off into the ether.
Right. I do have some advice if we have a little more time on for artists or anybody. I have a couple pieces of advice, and those are really go the distance and don't let anything hold you back. Don't be the guy that's growing corn in the Field of Dreams field. I have a relation of mine who went to film school, and he got a degree, and he was directing the football games, and he wanted to be a filmmaker, and he got his degree and all this stuff, and this is 10 years ago or something, and guess how many films he's made?
I don't know. I guess like none?
None.
Yeah.
None. So here's this guy who has a film degree, doesn't have any films.
Right.
I've got started my 3rd film, and I've worked on 4 or 5 other films for other people.
Have you ever approached him and said, "Hey, do you want to?"
I have, and this is where I'm getting to my advice. Don't let anything stop you, because he's I don't know if he just believes it or if the school told him or whatever it is. His big thing is he's always like, well, I can't do that because I don't have this camera and I don't have this I don't have a sound recording device, and I don't have the lights, and I don't have we didn't have any of that stuff.
So he just needs so your advice basically is just get out of your own way.
Yes, and don't work with what you have. If you don't have a nice camera, nowadays you got an iPhone. We just talked about this. Film with your iPhone. There's a guy that won some award for an iPhone movie. You know, you've got a camera right there. Part of our feature film that we made, I shot with an iPhone. Nobody knows. They can't tell the difference. So don't let anybody stop you. Don't go the distance, whatever it takes to make that kind of dream happen.
Well, that's going to conclude our interview with Bob the Beast East. And look him up on Instagram at The Art Beast. Be sure to like and subscribe here to the Artist Grapevine, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Once again, man, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you at the next caricature gig.
Looking forward to that.
All right, I'll see you guys later. Keep creating.